So today we're talking induction, and not just any induction, but induction at 39 weeks, because I am so tired of seeing these posts in the mom groups over and over and over again. And I'm sure you've seen them too, where it's like, my doctor has this policy to induce everybody at 39 weeks. First of all, I want to tell you again, you do not have to induce just because your care provider has a policy. And if you've been following the 5 pillars of empowerment and you know how to come to your birth from a place of power instead of a place of fear, you've probably already fired that care provider, or you've at least gotten into a dialogue with them to be like, look, I get what the recommendations are saying, and I'm not doing it because it's my choice and my decision, and there's no evidence for it. But why is this happening? Why is it now that we're being induced at 39 weeks instead of 40 weeks? Because it used to be that you'd get induced at 41 weeks. And now we have this induction date where everybody's anxious to get into labor before 39 weeks. What happened? The ARRIVE trial happened. So this was a study that was done about 5 or 6 years ago. And when it first came out, the entire doula and birth work community, everybody who understood physiological birth, we were like, oh. And the reason we were so upset was because we knew exactly what was going to happen. We knew that this study was going to end up being another thing for care providers who are looking for profit, convenience, and liability to manipulate you into agreeing to an induction. So the premise of this study, of course, was they wanted to see if babies did better on the outside if they were induced at 39 weeks versus 41 weeks. And they also wanted to see if your cesarean rate would go down. And what they found was that, yes, the cesarean rate did go a little bit further, like it did lower after if they induced at 39 weeks. So if you induced at 39 weeks, you had a lower chance of C-section, is what they said. And this went viral. This went all over all of the social media. These articles came out over and over and over again saying that elective induction at 39 weeks is better for moms and babies because it's healthier babies and less C-sections. Here's the little problem with this study. When they had the eligibility, there was over 22,000 people that were eligible for the study. They all had to be first-time moms with a head-down singleton baby. So one baby, head down, and the idea was either they were going to induce at 39 weeks or go into expectant management, which meant that they could have an elective induction, or what they could do is wait for labor. And what happened is that only about 25 to 27% of people, possibly even a little less than that, decided that they wanted to be in this study. About 75% were like, hell no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be electively induced. I don't want that kind of a birth. And rightfully so, because induction of labor is harder on your body and it's harder on your baby, and it does lead to a cesarean. Okay, so there's no doubt about that. Because even though the cesarean rate was lower with this ARRIVE trial, there were a few factors in place. First of all, in psychology, there's this idea that if you are being watched, you're going to behave a different way than if you were not being watched. So these care providers knew they were being watched. And so they were doing everything they could to make it so that their clients would not have a C-section. So they were giving them more time for labor, and they were allowing for more movement in labor. There was more support around. And this is not the norm for induction. So basically, they were trying everything that they possibly could, giving them a positive induction. But that's not the reality. The reality is that if you induce, you have a 35 to 60% chance of having a C-section, depending on where you go. And it all goes down to the fact that if you have the wrong care provider or the wrong environment, it's not going to facilitate a physiological birth. It's not going to facilitate a positive induction, and you're more likely to get pushed into a cesarean. So already these doctors knew they were being watched. And the moms who were participating in the study also wanted to be induced. So you have these two groups of people, and they may not have been even wanting a physiological birth in the first place. So that whole idea of a cesarean is lowered by inducing doesn't work if you're going to compare it to physiological birth, which is a birth that unfolds without any intervention. So even if you are inducing at 39 weeks versus 41 weeks or 42 weeks, it doesn't matter, because you're still hijacking the physiological process. You are still having a medicalized birth. You are not having a physiological birth. You are no longer in control of that environment. And so when people say, oh, well, it's better to induce 39 weeks, they're not telling you the whole story. Because again, this cohort was based on the idea of medicalized birth versus medicalized birth. It was like apples to apples, with just a slight variation in environment and slight variation in the number of days. And there are people who go naturally to 42 weeks. So if they were induced at 39 weeks, their babies might have been the ones that weren't doing too well, or they were the ones that had the C-section because their cervix was not favorable. And then on the other hand, you have these moms who might have already been going into labor at 39 weeks, and the induction just pushed them through the process. So when you're wanting to think about induction, one book that I highly recommend is called Why Induction Matters. And it's this one right here. So you want to pick up this book. You can get it on Kindle. It's written by Rachel Reed, same author of Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage. I even gave this book to Jenny as a birthday present this year, so that she would have it in her back pocket should she need to make any decisions around induction, because she has conditions that she wants to monitor, but otherwise we are planning a physiological birth. And the fact is that there's so many questions that you want to ask yourself before you induce labor. And what I've done is, if you've been in the guides section recently, you might have noticed that there's a whole bunch of free PDF guides. So all you need to do is go into the guide section of the Facebook group and check out this new guide that I have called Questions to Ask Before You Say Yes to an Induction. And that will give you an idea of the different things that you might want to question. And one of the big ones is inducing at 39 weeks or 40 weeks or 41 weeks, just because you're going past your due date. It doesn't make any sense to do that, because your baby's not ready, your body's not ready, and you have a more likely a chance of having a cesarean. So one thing that people always say, though, is, well, what about the stillbirth rate? Okay, well, the stillbirth rate goes from 1 per 1,000 to 2 per 1,000 to about 5 per 1,000 if you go past 43 weeks. It never gets to 1%. So no matter how far into labor you go and how long your gestation, you still have less than a 1% chance of a stillbirth. And we have monitoring for that. And we have like technology, and we have abilities to really notice if something's not wrong. Then you're going to know it. If something is wrong, you're going to know it. You're going to be able to say something isn't right. I think I need to be induced. So trust your own instincts. If you feel your baby's fine, probably fine. That's the way it is. If you don't feel that baby is fine, then by all means, go for an induction, go for extra monitoring, find out. And even if your care provider is brushing you off, if you feel that something's not right, it is your job to go out there and tell them, look, I am paying for a service here, or my insurance is paying for the service, and you need to serve me, because that's your job. Your job is not to tell me not to worry my pretty little head about it. Your job is not to tell me that I'm being hysterical. Your job is to serve me and provide me the service of which I'm hiring you for. And so the thing again is that, what do you do if your care provider is pushing you for an induction at 39 weeks? Well, first of all, as I said, if you've been following the 5 pillars of empowerment and you know how to hire the right care provider, and you know how to plan your birth in a way that comes from a place of power instead of a place of fear, then that's probably not going to be an issue for you. because you've hired the right care provider. Your care provider knows from the beginning of your pregnancy that you are not going to induce. They know this. They know that they can't push you into an induction at 39 weeks. If you know your rights inside and out, and you know all of the information that you need to know about the Arrive trial being incredibly stupid and not applying to you, then they can't pull the wool over your eyes. This is what I talk about when I say planning your birth from a place of power, is knowing your options, knowing your rights, knowing the evidence, knowing without a doubt that you are your own best decision maker, not your care provider. And whether they have a policy or not doesn't really concern you. And if they are threatening to drop you from care because you won't go for an elective induction that you don't need, well, bye, Felicia, because you don't need that kind of care provider in your life. You can go into labor on your own. You can birth your baby on your own. You can show up at the hospital at 10 centimeters and push that baby out right out in the lobby and be like, well, you know what? Like, you guys wouldn't listen to me, so I'm birthing this baby because I don't need to be induced. This is just a policy that you have that has nothing to do with me. But one thing I want you to know before I go today is that this is completely your decision. Completely your decision. I am not going to tell you what to do. I do have a bias, I will admit that, against induction for non-medical purposes, because I know what's on the other side of that. And I understand how birth physiology works. I've been studying this for almost 9 years now. My son has just turned 9 today, and I experienced a birth in a hospital, but I didn't experience full physiological birth myself until I birthed my daughter. So I know how this process works, and I've witnessed it with my clients, and I've witnessed it in the birth community, and I've talked to so many birth workers over the last 8 years. And it's one of those things that I'm just so passionate about, because I know that you deserve better. We all deserve better. And you don't need the pressure at the end of your pregnancy to induce if nothing's wrong. And in fact, a lot of the time, all of that stress and overwhelm of trying to get into labor is to beat an induction date that you don't need. So what if you just take that induction date away? What if when your care provider starts suggesting an induction at 39 weeks, you say, no, I don't think I'm going to be doing that. And then walk away. And if they keep pushing, say, I already said no. And if you continue, I'm going to fire you because this is ridiculous. I don't deserve this. I don't need this. I am going to rest. I'm going to relax and take your power back. All right. That's all I have for you today. And I will see you next week. Bye.